So thank you all very much again for coming, and without further ado, and without any more of me, I'll pass on to Sean Berry, the co-leader of the Green Party of England and Wales.
Thank you. So hello, I've been here in Sheffield since this morning. I had a really brilliant time actually. I asked especially for Sheffield to be one of my first visits as new co-leader. And mainly because you've got some amazing councillors, because you've been running some amazing campaigns, because you've got badges, and because this is a city I lived in for a short time when I was a student. I did a summer placement at British Skills Labs. I was a metallurgy student, and I lived in Sheffield, and I worked basically in Rotherham at their labs for a summer, so I was really interested to come back. The other thing I would say was, you've heard my little mini CV there. I'm the newly elected co-leader of the Green Party with Jonathan Bartley. I'm also a London Assembly member. I've been a London Assembly member since 2016, when I also ran for mayor, and I came third in the election there. We came third in the election overall. There are two London Assembly members, me and Caroline Russell, and between us we do a lot of work on transport, on housing, all of those things. We challenge Sadiq Khan, I hope, pretty well. I'm also a Camden Borough Councillor in London, and there I was elected first in 2014. And in both those cases I took over from the existing Greens on the London Assembly and on Camden Council. And we've got a long history of doing lots of good work, but again Sheffield is one of those places where we've had Greens for a long time, and we're increasing our numbers, so it's very exciting to be here. I've been asked to talk about transport, and actually I used to work for 5 years until I went onto the London Assembly. My job was a transport campaigner. I worked for an organisation called Campaign for Better Transport. It used to be called Transport 2000 until 2007, when they realised that name was very, very out of date. And they did great campaigning on buses, on railways, and I was a road campaigner. So I was out and about around the country supporting people who were trying to stop brand new roads being built, trying to stop motorways being widened, and that was a fantastic job too. And there I learned an awful lot about transport. So up until 3 years ago, I knew exactly what was happening with transport in the north. In the 3 years since, I've been a London Assembly member. I've mainly focused my efforts on London transport. So I've been really keen to come up here and talk to people in Sheffield, people in the north in general, about these plans for transport for the north, about the fact that you're finally starting to get a bit more investment into transport in the north. But it's still nowhere near enough. London and the South East hoovers up so much of the transport investment in a way that's completely unfair, and I hope we'll get into that later on, and I'm actually with you on that, even though half my job is to stand up for London, and I do hope to be mayor one day. I think it's entirely fair that we invest more in places that have less, not just keep adding more and more to the overheated South East. So I wanted to give a talk that was effectively, what do the Greens know about transport? Because I think it's an awful lot. I think we have a really good vision for how transport should work. So this is my talk, basically. This is why I'm not a teacher. The first thing we know, and this is really important, is that it's not about big, shiny projects and cutting ribbons. That's what most politicians think transport is about. Big, shiny projects, cutting ribbons, doing those photo ops where you're out there in high vis with the diggers. It's actually, really, transport is about everyday, practical problem solving, and it's not about the kit, it's about the people. We know that transport matters to people's daily lives. It's not there to be a transport mode, it's there to give you a service, which is access to your jobs, access to your school, how to get to the shops, to the hospitals, to the public services. Transport is access. It isn't about the kit that you use or the thing that you drive, anything you travel by. It really drives me mad that people get referred to as cyclists or motorists, and that they're in some kind of war. Because actually, most cyclists are motorists some of the time, quite a lot of motorists are cyclists, and everybody's just trying to get about. It really winds me up that without good public transport, what we end up with, and I've experienced this travelling around, particularly in the southwest, where they don't have good railway services, they don't have good buses, and they're being cut back, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. And there, you really are talking about people who are suffering from forced car ownership. And this is in areas where people are actually not really able to afford a car, where the expenses, the unexpected expenses that can come with car ownership can really knock a family down when, in a way that a bus fare wouldn't. And I think this is a really serious issue, forced car ownership. Some people live in what we call transport deserts, and again, that's a horrific thing to be in, a place where the only way you can get around is if you own a car, and if you don't have a car, if you can't drive because you're too old, or you've got disabilities now, or you just can't afford a car, you are really, really stuck. It is a social justice issue, getting transport right. So I think, yeah, communities, people of all ages need the Greens' practical problem-solving approach to really appreciate what transport is for and what it means to people's daily lives. The next thing that we know is a bit technical. We know that the transport planning hierarchy follows from this approach. And what that means is the thing you start with, as with energy saving, as Andrew will tell you, is reducing the need to travel. If you've got the public services you need, the shops you need, the things you need like your schools, your doctor's surgery, right there on your doorstep, you don't need to travel. And that is really important. We have to get things planned right. This also includes exciting things like digital approaches, helping people work more at home, looking at the world of work differently, providing more services online and making sure more people can get online. That's a way of reducing the need to travel that we need to focus on. And then when you need to travel, the hierarchy goes like this. It goes walking, cycling, buses, trams, rail, and then finally cars. But before you get to individual cars, you need to look at shared cars. I used to work as a trustee for the charity Car Plus, so based in Yorkshire, and who promote communally owned cars. And again, that's a way of not giving people forced car ownership, letting them share the cost of owning the car and paying just for what they drive. These are all things that we know about the transport planning hierarchy. We also know what happens and the damage it does when buses get cut. One thing that Campaign for Better Transport does every year, since I can remember, is find out what is being cut from council-supported bus services. And this is their latest report, which I've printed out really weirdly, but you can find it online. It's called Buses in Crisis this year, which is, I think, a new title for this year. And it really is true. In the Sheffield region, the bus funding between 2011 and 2018 is 43%. That's how much less the council is spending on buses in the Sheffield area since then. And actually, the figure across England is 46%. And this is a crisis. This leads to people genuinely being cut off. Campaign for Better Transport asked people to tell their stories about how lack of transport can lead to loneliness. And one person said, I've had someone who drives a community transport bus that's trying to make up some of this difference. He says, I've had many passengers say that my arrival is the first time they've been out of the house in months due to lack of public transport. We've had someone else say, since losing our bus service, my village has been effectively cut off from the wider community. You may think loneliness affects only the elderly, but as soon as the bus was axed, my children were unable to meet friends at the weekend or take part in activities. This has a huge impact on their self-esteem and confidence. So yeah, bus cuts have an effect. And I just want to say one thing quickly about that figure of 43%, because that's a really familiar figure to me. I do a lot of work on council cuts generally, and I've been looking at youth service cuts across London. I've also been looking at library cuts around the country. Every single time you do this study, you ask the council what you cut from these services. These discretionary services, the ones they don't have to provide, cuts are always somewhere between 40 and 45%. It's always that figure. And actually, when you look at the amount of cuts there have been in terms of the government grant from government to councils in the time that we're talking about, 2010, the beginning of austerity until now, that is 49%. So this is councils actually doing slightly better than what they've had cut from them. But all these services having this whittled away. And when you're talking about the buses being cut to get you to the community centre, well, if the community centre's been cut as well, and the library's been cut as well, then we really are looking at a crisis in social things. So, yeah, just to say that transport is part of the big picture. Okay, the next thing we know is that new roads create new traffic. This, I don't know why this isn't like better known amongst everybody, but it's absolutely true. If you build a new road, if you widen a road, it will fill up with what's called induced demand. And that's why the policy of predict and provide, which as far as I can tell does underlie the strategy for transport in the area, certainly as far as roads are concerned. Predicting what the traffic growth will be if it follows the current trajectory, and then providing that amount of road space. It doesn't work, and it wastes money, because by the you've built this road, you've spent millions. It's a really expensive thing to do, build a road. Lots of transport interventions are much cheaper. And you do that, and then 5 years later, it's full again. And everyone's going, we need a bypass for the bypass. There's really no point in that, and we know this. There's another reason to change this as well. And it's not just about road space or countryside or anything like that. It's about air pollution. And I think everybody in Sheffield knows the crisis of air pollution that you have. I know many of you have been measuring it, seeing how much over the legal limits it is. And this is a combination of the motorways that you have, your ring roads, and the lack of public transport, forcing too many people to drive to work. It absolutely has to change. I also noticed that the Strategic Transport Plan for Transport for the North doesn't have a carbon reduction objective, which seems wrong. Every transport plan should be seeking to contribute to reducing carbon. I don't know why it doesn't. At the moment, we've neglected transport so much in our carbon planning for the UK that transport is now the largest sector in terms of emissions. All the others have been cutting down, the energy supply, all the other big industries have been cutting down, and they've been made to by the plans that we've made. And then transport has been left, so it's just still there. And now it's the highest emitting industry, the highest emitting sector in the UK. This is wrong. All transport plans should be contributing to carbon reduction. And we also know that traffic reduction is the missing link in most transport plans. Predict and provide, we need the opposite of that. We need a plan to reduce transport, car travel. We need a plan to reduce things going around by lorry. We need to be shifting people's travel that they need to do onto less polluting modes. The Committee on Climate Change, which comments on our progress towards fulfilling our carbon objectives, each year just gets more and more strident in its reports, saying to the government, look, you're neglecting traffic reduction, you need policies for traffic reduction. And the other reason is, well, it's fares really. I mean, if you get on the trains, but they're really expensive. And this is because we expect people who use public transport to pay for the public transport. Whereas on roads, we actually subsidise the roads. Nationally, I know drivers think they pay out a fortune, but actually they don't pay out as much as the roads cost us to build. And we do need to be fairer about that. We can't just be getting the money for public transport from the fare payers, because they're doing the right thing. In London, we subsidise our roads absolutely hugely. We do have a congestion charge, but there's still a deficit there. So we're putting money from bus fares, from rail fares. About 400 million of it goes into maintaining our roads, and this is partly because the government cut us off from getting any money from the road tax even. But even the road tax doesn't cover the amount that we want to that people spend on the roads in the UK, and that does need to change. And measures that do things like low emission zones, things like workplace parking levies, that encourage people to shift away from driving, take that money and spend it on the public transport that we actually need, that give them that alternative. That's the right policy to have. We've got to be moving bit by bit in this direction. And things like a workplace parking levy, which I hope people will ask about, are the mildest, most sensible way of doing that, and stop a long way short of very controversial road pricing, which is even controversial in London, I have to say. Right, the second to last thing, how long have I got? Cool. So the next thing is, we know that integrating planning and transport matters. This seems obvious. We should be planning where we put our houses, and we should be planning our transport together. But it really doesn't happen very often at all. Quite often people will plan to put new houses in and then wonder why nobody's catching the bus when there isn't actually a bus. We actually have to be planning all our new homes around public transport corridors, and we have to make sure the transport is there when people move into the homes. This is, and again, I'm a London Assembly member. We're looking at the planning for London. This London plan, the London plan we're just drafting now, that's going to come in a couple of years' time, is the first one I've seen that actually properly does that, and that's London. So the rest of the country, it's an absolute nightmare, is spatial planning just isn't done the right way, and we need to be integrating planning and transport much better. We also need to be integrating town centres, local businesses and all of that into these plans, and not ignore the fact that on a regional level, linking up cities, this is why HS2 isn't a brilliant idea, basically, because we'd be much better off linking up the cities across the north into a region that is more, that's trading with each other, that people are linked together. This is a thing called agglomeration, and it happens in the areas of Germany where quite a few of their cities are situated. That region is not the capital city of Germany, it's all these other cities. And because they're linked together well with trams and trains, there's agglomeration there, those cities trade with each other, it's a strong region. And what HS2 tries to do, and this is what normally happens when you link two places together, the richer place gains, and it actually drains economic growth, which we don't particularly like, but economic activity from the poorer place. And that's why, we should be opposing HS2. We should be campaigning to link up the cities across the north, but not necessarily with high-speed rail. So the next thing I want to say is we know that reusing, recycling, and upgrading infrastructure in building up networks of local transport is actually good value and less risky than big projects. And the contrast in London I draw here is between Crossrail, big fancy project, really big tunnel being done all the way through London. It's going to be 24 trains an hour, it's really big and shiny. It's a good thing, it's going to be a year late. It's going to be more expensive than we thought. It's going to do a lot of good, but meanwhile, quietly, we've been linking up the rail lines that run around the outer edge of London to create London Overground. And this is a plan that I put together with Alan Francis, who was the Green Party, he probably still is the Green Party's transport policy expert, who went, look, if you just link and create this little link here and this little link here, and then we'll have an orbital all the way around. And this took about 5, 6, 7 years to get going, and then we finished the ring off just a few years ago. But very quietly, we've taken existing links, we've made the Ginger Line, which is what we call it in London, and it's a line of very frequent trains. There are now 5 carriages every 8 minutes. It's not shiny, it's not big, it's not billions and billions were spent. Money was spent, but it was good value money. It's made such a difference to people's lives, travelling around these sort of inner bits of outer London, getting to each other, travelling sideways, not all going into the city. It's been very, very good for diversifying our economy. And I think around here, things like the Don Valley plan, creating a little bit more of the network that will bring more people in, looking for ways to put lower speed but reliable, good, everyday links in to create a proper network around here. It's better value than focusing on something that might be a long way away and very shiny and delayed, like HS3, which is the loop across the north. Let's create a proper network of trains for everyday use. But the final thing to note is that public democratic control is essential. And this isn't just nationalising the railways, this is about the buses. It doesn't mean necessarily the council buying and running all the buses, but it does mean councils having control. I've got this very good leaflet handed to me today, and that's exactly what people are asking for. The powers that you have now, the London Bus Services Act, to actually specify and control more of what your buses do is good, and you should be using it. And again, my good colleagues at Campaign for Better Transport produced this guide called 3 Stages to Better Bus Services with the Bus Services Act, which is really good, and I think you should be campaigning very, very hard for that kind of control, because focusing on that everyday travel, the buses that everyone uses every day, building up that network, getting those incremental improvements is how we fix transport. It isn't just a big fix, a big project that will solve everything. It's lots of little things that affect people's everyday choices and people's everyday access to services that we need to be focusing on. So yeah, finally, what do the Greens say about transport? We know it doesn't fit into 15 minutes, no matter how hard you try, and I hope that was a useful introduction to some of the principles and some of the things that I've learned over the years as a transport campaigner. And I hope you'll now fire back some questions at me and tell me where you think this doesn't apply locally, where it might apply locally, and ask me lots of questions. I think that would be really cool. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It may may be impossible to cover all transport in 15 minutes, but I think you gave it a very good go there and made it local as well. It's absolutely brilliant. That's following on, by the way, from a few hours in the company of Sheffield activists, our councillors, and kind of touring around the Sheffield ring road and that as well today. So when Sean's been out and about finding out about Sheffield transport issues, it's been absolutely brilliant to hear. So thank you very much for giving us your time as well. I will say before we move on that there will be ample opportunity to ask questions after both of our speakers have gone. So please do have a think. If you have anything that Sean said or that Andrew says that you want to find out a bit more about, or you want to query, or kind of seek out more of the local links, then please do kind of jot down your questions and be ready to ask. We don't have a roving mic, we don't have a mic. So you will have to speak up just a little bit when we get to that. In the meantime, though, we've got Andrew Cooper, as a Taker, Police Councillor, and a member of the Committee of the Regions. Transporting climate change. Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, just to kick off, I'm Andrew Cooper. I'm a councillor in Huddersfield, in Kirklees. Will have been so for 20 years in May. And I got here today from on the pedestal line, Huddersfield, Sheffield. About an hour and 25 minutes. Low speed 1. As I like to call it. And one of the things that we were doing in Huddersfield, it must be nearly 3 years ago, was we put together our response to the West Yorkshire Transport Strategy. And we were very fortunate in West Yorkshire. We've got a lot of good folks who know about transport issues and are experts. I'll name check Mr. Chas Ball, who's in the audience here, who's done a lot of work on that. And so we got together. We thought it was actually a pretty good response to the West Yorkshire Transport Strategy. The one bit that I wish we'd sent in, which we actually didn't in the end, was they asked us the question, where should the station, the intermediate station between Liverpool and Hull on HS3 be situated? And the answer we wanted to put was it should be situated in Narnia. The reason it should be situated in Narnia because a fantasy project should be located, the station should be located in a fantasy kingdom. And so we didn't actually put that in the end. But there were some really very positive things that we put into that. And one of the principal things, they said, how should we measure progress? How should we actually look at progress in the West Yorkshire Transport Plan? Well, you could actually link it to the Paris Climate Agreement. You could actually look at the carbon emissions that come from transport, because Sean's 100% right. You look at these transport plans, you look at the strategies they're put together, and one of the things that we do tend to find is that carbon emissions are often completely ignored, or just touched upon in a small way. And we said there should be a hierarchy, and the hierarchy should be the pedestrian at the top and the car at the bottom. And we should actually look at our strategy in that way to make sure that we emphasise that what everybody generally does, and that's generally walk around or whatever. We thought that community rail, I mean, I've joked about low speed 1, but that's a very well used service, and lots of people use it to get to and from us. It's like a heritage railway. You know, you sort of get on this, run by enthusiastic volunteers. Somehow or other, that train keeps going. And it's amazing that line, which links two places, are actually very close together. It seems to be, it seems to be the sort of line you want to link with Trans-Siberian Express or something. It's one of those epic journeys, and it really should be. One of the key things is that policy, transport policy, assumes, like so many things, that growth is a good thing, and that ever-expanding growth is somehow positive. I've stood on the train between Huddersfield and Leeds at crush hour, and it is, you honestly would not transport animals in those conditions. And you look at the investment in HS2, and you look at the investment in local infrastructure, and it's incredibly important. So we need to look at modal shift. We need to actually look at getting people out of the cars and offering alternatives. Because if we don't offer alternatives, of course people are going to use cars and vehicles and such like. So we need to do that. Another key thing was they were talking about, hey, we've got to really improve transport links to Leeds Bradford Airport. As if planes weren't transport. Yeah, and if planes were somehow not huge carbon producers, and that we could get there in a really low carbon factory. Yeah, there's a bit of a problem there. But also we talked about we want to improve roads. We want to deal with the problems of potholes. We want to do those things because who are the people who are potentially affected the most? Cyclists. Cyclists can die because of potholes, and cyclists certainly have been injured to a huge degree in potholes. Another thing they came up with was we want to have the best bus service in Europe. The best bus service in Europe. So they didn't explain how they measure that. They didn't explain why they didn't want the best system for pedestrians, or why they didn't want the best system for cyclists. It was just a phrase, and it didn't mean anything. So we put in a really good response. And if you want to look at that, the response we put, it's on my website, Councillor Andrew Cooper. Because I feel better when people read my blog. So the next thing I want to talk about, because we are limited for time, is COP24, in Poland that started now, and I'm going on my way to tomorrow. And I'm going to start by asking you a question. Who is UKIP's spokesperson on local government in Europe? Anybody idea? Any idea? No? You. It's me. It's true, it's me. I'm UKIP's local government spokesperson. And the reason that is true is because the Committee of the Regions, which is the body which represents local government across Europe, on policy, on European policy, has 24 delegates in the UK, and I'm the representative of the Local Government Association Independent Group, which represents independent, Green and UKIP councillors. So therefore, don't tell UKIP. I'm the worst representative of UKIP you ever might find. So one of the things that happens as a result of that is I get to be part of their delegation to go to the COP20 processes, the COP21, 22. So I was at Paris when the Paris Climate Agreement was put together. And one of the questions I still ask was, how come nobody's actually been in touch with local authorities about these carbon emissions? How come nobody's said to us, how can you help? How can you help us achieve the carbon savings that we need to achieve? Because one thing was pretty clear, that national governments had not identified the carbon savings that we needed to do to keep global temperatures below the 1.5 degrees, which may give us a more stable climate. And so that's your question. That was 3 years ago. So my question to you now is since then, I'm in touch with chief executives and various other folks. How many emails, letters, correspondence has come to us from national government since about how we can help them achieve the Paris climate goals? Yeah, okay, it's zero. There has been no contact from national government to local government about helping them achieve Paris climate goals. So in my role at the Committee of the Regions, I came with a proposal. And the proposal was that we establish locally determined contributions, locally determined ways that we could add to the emissions which have been identified at national levels. And that was accepted, and the Committee of the Regions, which represents local government across Europe, said, yeah, okay. It wasn't as simple as that, it was a huge long story, but they accepted it. And then from there onwards, we persuaded the European Parliament to accept it. And going into COP24 in Poland, they have said, yeah, we support that concept, we support that idea. We support the idea that the United Nations would give a statement saying that local and regional authorities should give their input that we should have locally determined contributions. So I'm quite hopeful that as we go into those talks that we might be able to get that through the United Nations. There's certainly a movement now, it's a small movement, but it's a growing movement of people who want to see actually happen. And I'm hopeful. I mean, the key thing is that will it actually get the additional carbon savings we need to reach 1.5 degrees? Will it get that action going? And the key thing about local governments is they can act very, very quickly. If they decide to do a project, if they're given the impetus, because we're so close to citizens, we can get an insulation project going really quickly. We can get renewables projects going really quickly. We can get LED streetlights going through. There's lots of things that we can actually do. We can put planning policies in place very quickly. So if we can mobilise that sort of effort, then a lot more might happen than is happening otherwise. And there's another particular reason that I wanted this to happen. Another reason why I wanted authorities lower than the state level to be able to input directly into the United Nations process. And that's because of the United States. Because, of course, President Trump is saying, I'm going to come out of the Paris Climate Agreement. But does it matter if lower than him at the state level, at the lower authority levels that go all the way through the US society, if they say, whatever you say, Mr. President, we're going to carry on. We're going to carry on dealing with, we will make our contribution towards the Paris Climate Agreement. So by passing this, we would empower those people in the United States who actually want to deal with reality and tackle climate change. So the next 10 days are going to be a big moment for me. I've got a lot of people working quite hard for me, producing materials and setting up meetings with various national delegations. And so I'm hopeful that come the end of these talks that we'll get some really positive news.
Right, what you said tonight, guys, is spot on, and we need to reduce carbon emissions, etc. But I've come here for a reason tonight. Grand Northern, the company I've set up, I don't get paid for anything, but we set up a company to reopen the Woodhead Railway line, which is a hidden gem. But it was closed in 1981. The thing is, we're going to get stopped in our tracks. I was involved with TransLink 10 years ago to do the same thing, and we were stopped by National Grid because they put the cables through the tunnel. So I then went back into my hole, but 10 years have moved on. We've got you're going to this thing tomorrow, aren't you?
Yep.
Right. David Attenborough is speaking today,
Yep.
and he says it's the greatest threat to mankind. Okay? If we open this railway, we'll take all the trucks off the Pennine routes, off the A628, A616. I'm a trucker, right? So I know what it's like, and I've had people killed, friends of mine killed on the bypass there. There was a crash coming in to Sheffield on the bypass, Stocksbridge bypass. So I know what it's like. So what I'm trying to say is, we need the support of Green Party, because we're going to get stopped in our tracks again, so to speak. National Grid now want to take the line east of Dunford Bridge and bury their cables under it.
Yep.
They bury their cables under that line, it's basically game over for Woodhead. It'll never be reopened. We've got an opportunity now. The planning issues are going to be very small because it's already been built. The planning went on in the Victorian age, yeah, when they built a line originally. If you're a Sheffield person, you'll see Woodhead every day via the Wicker Viaduct. What a piece of engineering. So we can get that open, and believe me, it will make money, okay? It'll take over 150,000 tonnes of diesel emissions. Not 150,000, 300,000 tonnes, 150,000 tonnes of CO2. But the key is, we've got to stop National Grid from doing this work.
Okay, I'll give our speakers a chance to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I just so just to clarify, you're talking about reopening the rail tunnel from rail and putting the lorries onto a train, not letting lorries drive through the tunnel. Just
No,
to be
that's
super
exactly
clear,
right. You wouldn't get me
I didn't know that, I just wanted
tunnel. Yeah, believe me, you will not get any truck driver to drive through a 30-mile-long tunnel.
Yes, that's
So
true.
that's
Good,
what
just
they were
checking.
talking about.
Right.
That's what they were talking about. That's how clever they are, our transport planners.
Okay.
The lorries will come off the road at Bredbury, Stockport, M60, and they'll go back onto the M1 at junction 34, Tisley Marshalling Yard.
Okay, I can't speak for Sheffield councillors, but look, maybe we might be interested. One approach we might want. What about if you worked with us to produce a model motion that we could put to our councils? It's obviously Kirkland's council is affected. We could work together on a motion that we can put as the Green Party, but we could get other parties who try and gain their support to get a higher profile. So if you get political bodies to back it, maybe Sheffield as well, we could look at that, and then see the area around Woodhead Pass, which is affected by it, for instance, Manchester Council as well. We'll see what we can do to get a wide support and wider political support for it.
There is an issue, there is a petition now, not set by me, there's some guys in Guidebridge, Staler Bridge, and they have set up a petition, a government petition, and you can go online and just type in A628 government petitions, and there's one going. And if it gets to 100k, it's going to be debated in Parliament.
Yeah.
Okay, and Sean?
I'd support Andrew's idea there because that is, I mean, a petition's great, but you need to get people who can make decisions, people who've got the connections to look at the issue. And motions are a great idea. Can I just ask, do you know, I don't want to do too much casework here, but does the National Grid need to get that through planning and things before they can do it? There's a way of stopping them.
Yeah, there's a way. They're doing it now. I went on Saturday to Dunfer Bridge. Okay, there was a farmer with a sheepdog. There was a couple there who were horse riders on the current bridleway, which is what it is now. It's a bridleway. And there was another gentleman there, I can't remember, but it's like, and there were 9 people from National Grid. And where was it advertised? It's only because I got it through a backdoor mail, contacted National Grid.
But it's a planning application essentially.
Yes. This is a consultation process. There's several.
There's time to stop it. That's the important thing.
Okay.
We can't spend all night on one issue, unfortunately.
Thank you very much.
But that's great.
Go on.
Thank you. I want to ask a question about how we can use the Extinction Rebellion to really scale up what we're going to do. And I was very inspired, it was just by a letter in The Big Issue that some people might have seen, signed by bishops and Hindu leaders and Gillian Creasy. And it talks about how our government has totally failed to protect its citizens and that we have a moral duty to rebel and really support the Extinction Rebellion in its claims and calling on that it is a climate emergency and for rapid decarbonisation and a citizens' assembly. What we do know is that Bristol, the whole council, has declared a climate emergency and is putting forward a plan to decarbonise and has brought forward its date to 2030. Clydeside is working with the health services, several local authorities and local industry to really get a decarbonisation plan and has appointed people to do that. So here we are in Sheffield with all of our green councillors. So just saying, can we up our game? Kirkley, Sheffield and whatever, but really use this, the Extinction Rebellion and some of the excitement that it's generated to really up the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get government to believe, isn't it, that there's a climate emergency if they're doing a 3rd runway at Heathrow and all the other things that they're up to. So, I mean, Extinction Rebellion is part of a lot of people in the Green Party are involved in it, aren't they? And it's all part of the positive stuff. Many people in the Green Party have been involved, like myself, in non-violent direct actions and things like that. So it's part of what we're about. It's part of our psyche. It's part of our DNA, what we're about. So the important thing, though, I think, is to look at what you've said about how can we get climate emergency on the agenda. And one of the things the Association of Green Councillors is doing is getting a model motion, like we talked about at HS3, for councils for green councils to put to the councils, which will be making available to every councillor in the whole country. And I'm supposed to finish my part on that tomorrow morning, so I'm going to be on a train tomorrow morning to Brussels doing that, sending it out. So we're pretty much there then, because some people have helped us along the way, such as Bristol. So yeah, we're on it.
So yeah, I just, they're brilliant. They are. I went on the climate march in London on Saturday. Talked to a lot of people. And I think these are, like Andrew says, these are all the same people as us really who are doing this. I don't think they want political parties to be part of what they're doing. I think one of their issues is that political parties so far have failed them. But if any political party is going to react to do what they're asking for, and honestly, Citizens Assembly, the best thing ever, then it's us, basically, and that's why Bristol councillors put that motion. We're all on a different time. I'm putting a motion to my next council meeting, which is the first one I could have. Caroline Russell's putting one to Islington, I think, this week. We're both putting one this Thursday to the London Assembly. We're pretty confident that's going to go through. I can't tell you about but this is how we get lots of motions through the London Assembly because there's no majority there, so we all get together with other parties. Pretty confident it's going to pass, and it is going to ask the Mayor to do exactly what the Bristol motion asks, which is work out how to bring forwards our targets to 2030, what that means London has to do, and what the government has to do to support us in doing that, because we know that London on its own can't do this. So it's things like that. We're doing it, but they wouldn't want us to use them, I don't think. And they wouldn't want us to not respond either, because we are the Green Party and we're the ones who respond to climate emergency in the right way. And just say, my colleague Caroline in the Assembly did bring this up with the Mayor like the day after the IPCC. So Mr Mayor, you're going to bring forward our targets in 2030, are you? And he's like, we're doing Paris. Anyway, so yes, it's all good, and you will see Green Parties all around the country responding in exactly the way I think the Extinction Rebellion people would like us to. And I think the other parties are listening. I think the direct action is being effective. And I think with us pushing it, they'll be even more keen to do. Lots of parties are wanting to do what we ask at the moment. They're all trying to outbid each other to be green. So hopefully we'll get lots of motions passed, and that'll mean lots of action in the future.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? We'll go Bing, please.
Okay, just to follow on from that, the key thing about Extinction Rebellion is to get arrested, and it's to cut through all of the politics, and I'm so glad that I'm a member of the Green Party, because we need to have that long, steady slog. But Extinction Rebellion is quite different. It's saying, stand up, make a real fuss. I got arrested on Lambeth Bridge 10 days ago. So, and there's a good Sheffield group. If anybody's interested, come and find me or look on Facebook. We will be planning actions here, and there will be opportunities, and it's a different kettle of fish. But it's going to be a real thumper, I hope. Okay, so thank you very much.
Just to be clear though, you don't have to want to get arrested to.
So there is a little team of people. You can have any role that you like, but the key, I think, it really does need to be stressed that we're not going to get the kind of action that we need. We're not going to turn the super tankers of the oil industry around unless we do something much more radical. The government, the media are all tied in with these people. We need to do something different. So yeah, only a small number of people need to be arrested, but lots of other people can have other roles in supporting and just being there. So thank you very much.
This is the great thing about the Green Party. I'm thinking about, I'm going to go to the Green Party conference. You could be embarrassed if I've not been arrested. So, yeah.
You have nothing to lose but to care.
I find it impossible to get arrested. I don't know what it is about me, but just, I don't know what to do. But there you go.
Okay, thank you very much. Graham.
Following the Extinction Rebellion theme, if we've only got 12 years to get our action together on climate change, are the Green policies on transport now strong enough, or should we be demanding far more?
I can't. I mean, that's yeah, I couldn't tell you technically. We are looking constantly at our policies, and we're currently doing a review in light of the likelihood of a general election coming up. We are looking at all of that, but they have always been the right policies, our transport policies. They are quite radical, actually. So you never know, it might be getting us there to zero by 2030.
Well, one of the things that we're really looking with is we've got some, in the climate change working group and the energy policy working group of the Green Party, we've got some real great beam counters. You know, they really do go into a lot of detail about seeing whether we can actually achieve the carbon savings over there. And we need that sort of rigour because it's not there in government policies, and so they really care deeply about whether we're actually going to achieve the targets. So I get the point. They tell me that we're on the right lines, and I have a lot of faith in them.
I remember our target has been 2030 for a while, hasn't it? We've set the wrong targets.
90%.
Okay, can I just have a show of hands again, please? Rich? You in there, back there, yeah?
Me?
Yeah,
Okay.
go on.
Macron, fuel taxes. I wonder what your views are on this, because we have to pay, obviously, for public transports, and they're always going to be complete advance. And historically, there's a Green Party who supported previous school reforms, which is taxes onto energy and raw materials. But what you've seen in France is a bit of a reality check in terms of how the average person on the street might perceive that kind of policy. So I wonder if you have any observations on that.
Thinking very hard about that, actually, because obviously we did have fuel protests in this country, which were quite dramatic as well, though not quite as dramatic as what we're seeing in France. But it isn't our policy to just do that. It is the policies we're trying to develop in London, for example, are fair policies. So not just simply racking up the price of fuel that charges you by the mile, it's looking at charging fairly for road use based on the time of day, what part of London it is, so that the areas that have the biggest concentrations of public transport, the centre of London, the areas that have the worst air pollution, they would cost more to drive on, but the bits about London that are poorly served by public transport wouldn't cost very much at all. And it's fairness that people need to see. And it can't just be a fuel tax, because quite often you've got the lower, you know, the older, crapper cars are the ones that have the highest fuel use. So that isn't quite fair, and you need that fairness. I mean, the other big thing, and this is one of my big issues that I work on in London as well, is civil liberties and privacy and you know, police spying and all of that. And so I'm also trying to work out how we can have a fair system that charges you by the mile according to the time of day and the amount of pollution and the amount, you know, all of the things that make the system fair, that also isn't tracking your every move. And it's very, very difficult. And it needs to come as a result of people wanting that to happen, recognising the fairness, and also knowing that the money that you make from a system like that, anything that comes up as surplus, is for reinvestment. And that's the only way we got the congestion charge through in London in the first place, was Ken Livingstone being absolutely 100% clear about what he was going to do with the money, and also front-loading some investment into the buses, so people could already see the buses were improving quite dramatically. He took money off the fares as well. He did all of that to convince people that he was serious about improving the alternatives that they had while he did that. So it gets very, very delicate, has to be done very carefully. Don't think that's what Macron did, to be honest. It's not the way. You can't just go bashing people over the head with a tax and expect them to not react badly, particularly when he's got a resurgent right wing who are taking advantage of it all that.
Sure, and I think culture shift is really key. But I remember, about 18 years ago, we had the fuel protests here, and the fuel ran out and everything. And I remember a story somebody told me in Halifax, where I was working for Calderdale Council. They'd seen this old lady helping this guy with a briefcase, explaining how the bus worked and everything, and where he should put his change and everything. And it was great, you know, somebody who'd obviously never used a bus before was actually having to use public transport. And that was forced modal shift, which was obviously didn't last that long. But you did tend to find that people, when people didn't have that option, that they found a way and that they used public transport then. But I've recently travelled between Brockholes, where I live, and Budapest. The worst, I go on 6 trains. I got from Brockholes to Budapest. The worst train was from Brockholes to Huddersfield. The worst train. And so, you know, I think we've really got to look at what we do in this country and make public transport the transport of choice. You know, why would I want to join a mobile car when I can go easily on public transport and pleasant?
Liam.
On this topic of changing public perception, you talked about this bizarre myth that people feel like we just need to build more roads and that will solve the problem. We know very clearly that that's not the case. How are we going to challenge that? How can we challenge that when it seems to be so ingrained at all levels of decision making?
I think it's really difficult. This is a lot of work I did at Campaign for Better Transport was talking to the people in the Treasury, the economists in the Department for Transport, who absolutely insist on demand-led transport planning, predicting demand based on what's happening now, what happened in the past, and it's really, really difficult to get them to change away from that. And when your policies reinforce that as well, so if you say, well, car use will go up 50% in the next 25 years, so we've got to increase the road space by 50%. If you increase the road space by 50%, then car use will go up by more than 50%, and you'll have proved your point. And kind of, it's really difficult to show that things can go the other way. They have been somewhat. I mean, economic growth, which is one of the things they put into their model to predict the growth of car use, has decoupled quite a lot from the actual increase in traffic, but not in a way that's actually convinced the economists to change their mind yet. But it's exactly the same process that leads all the transport investment to end up in the southeast, because they rate transport investment according to transport benefits, and they do that by adding up the amount of time saved by people on different modes of transport. So if you've got a really busy line, like Thameslink or whatever, that runs through London and it's packed out in the mornings, and you can get that running a bit faster, that saves people loads and loads of time because there's loads of them. So even if they're saving a few minutes each, that's a good investment to make. Whereas on your line there that you were talking about, where there's maybe not that many trains an hour and therefore not that many people on it, and therefore if you speed it up, there aren't so many people, that's not a good investment to make. But even if you're saving those people an hour of that, an hour and a half journey time, sounds like that journey should be about half an hour. It doesn't actually count for much. And it doesn't go as far as to actually rate people less highly if they're in the north than if they're in the south, but it does count drivers' time as more valuable than people on buses, which is rude. So there's lots wrong with the economic modelling, and that's what needs to change. It's like with the planning rules. If you change like the actual rules for what counts as affordable housing and how much affordable housing you need, and you make that the bottom line, then you change everything that happens afterwards. That's why I work so hard on planning in my current job. Because once you've done that, it changes every single scheme that comes forward. We can just break that in the Treasury. I take transport planning out of the hands of the Treasury, because not everything, like we talked about, not everything can be boiled down to money. Some things are worth doing for other reasons, for social reasons. And if we can just capture that in the decision making and make that the reason we do these investments, it'd be so much better. So yeah, that's what we do. We take transport planning away from the Treasury and the economists.
And transport planners.
And take it away from transport planners. Yeah? And I think actually a lot of transport planners get this and would relish and use a new way of making decisions. They're just not allowed.
Okay. Question over there?
If local authority action gets linked to UN strategy, how's it going to work in this country? We've got the government overturning local planning things to get fracking pushed.
I'm glad you asked me that question. Okay, local, you mentioned fracking in particular. I've got some good news. The Kirklees local plan is just been accepted by the planning inspectorate, and the Green Party put in an amendment to the plan. And we said under the minerals policy that any application for gas extraction, fracking, minerals extraction, will have to demonstrate how it has net zero impact on climate change. And it was accepted. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And the reasons we gave was because the government signed up to COP21, the Paris Climate Agreement. Government believes in the climate change. So the things that they've said, we've said on the basis of that, then it makes sense that any fracking application should have to be net zero carbon. And I thought I'd put that in as a political statement. And then the planning inspector looked at it and went, yeah, that's all right. Sometimes you're lucky. But what it means is that the planning inspector has accepted that. Then Sheffield Council could do it. Any council in the country can put together plans and go, if you've done it, we can do it. So let's get to it. Let's get going.
Can I point out one thing the government's trying to do that's a bit of a spanner in the works in your plan there?
Okay.
Which they're trying to bring fracking into the major infrastructure planning process.
Yeah.
And if they do that, that takes it out of the local plan process. You just become like an interested party. You can say this breaks our local plan.
Okay.
But the inspectorate at that point can just look at government. They'll do a national policy statement that says we want fracking. Sorry, this is exactly how the government tries to undermine local decision making.
So, yeah, but we've actually got to make them do it.
Yes, that'll be the response.
that-
Blatant, won't it?
It will,
It'll be,
because
yeah.
by actually doing this, by putting it forward, they will have to overrule again local opinion.
Yeah.
So every obstacle we can put in their way, we've got to do that.
It's probably you doing that that's made them come up with this new plan, actually.
So it's my fault.
No. It's
So my new kids energy sports I'm really getting this wrong.
No, you just do something right if they're fighting you with that kind of nonsense.
The other point
They are
is...
going to do. We'll have to fight that off really soon, I think.
But sorry, the other point is that basically, if we get this past the UN level, then it'll filter down. So I'm in a bit of a race against time here. I'm going there as an EU representative, going to COP21. If Brexit happens, that's my last shot. So I go to COP21, get it passed hopefully by the United Nations, then it filters down. So yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Bernard.
Yeah, the other aspect of the Extinction Rebellion is the loss of species during the sixth major extinction period in global history. And regional wildlife trusts have produced strategies to protect habitats. And I think that if local councils, regional councils, can be seen to be supporting those strategies and embed them into the plans for the 4 areas, I think that would get, that's another lever that we could be using, and it has the added benefit of getting lots more people out there being prepared to get
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So,
you talked about how HS2 will boost the economy of London and the South East at the expense of the rest of the country, particularly the Midlands and the North. On the other hand, there is also the supporters of HS2 argue that it will help to encourage people to switch from the more polluting modes of transport, particularly from domestic flights on journeys like London to Scotland or even say London to Newcastle. So how do you reconcile those two trade-offs?
I mean, that's an interesting one. I mean, it will do that. How does the government reconcile their plan to expand quite a lot of regional airports then in that case? I mean, it's their transport policy that isn't integrated. HS2 will have that effect that we're talking about.
And so I mean, the question is have shares in Manchester Airport collapsed because of HS2? Have shares in Leeds Bradford Airport collapsed? No, because it's not going to do what we need to happen. For them to say it's going to stop air flights is, I think, disingenuous.
Also, airports do the same thing. I mean, one of the big things that City Airport does is suck people out onto mini breaks. So this is an airport in the middle of London that's mainly used for short flights, and it's really want to get rid of it. And it mainly sucks people off on like mini breaks and holidays, which they would otherwise take in the UK. So it actually takes money out of the country rather than creating any kind of benefit for us. It's really tends to be what happens with most things.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more questions probably, so if I could just have a show of hands, any last people who want to ask. Okay.
It's just a point about, just as you would have a box saying what effect does this policy have on climate change, which is great for all the legislation. When you're on the doorstep, and also our critics who say, well, it's great, but it's typical Green Party, just a wish list, and particularly when you talk to people on the doorstep about their car use, which is imperative, you get invective at worst and at best. What I'd like to see happen is, why can't we link a fair tax system and the idea that paying tax is your membership fee for being in a civilised society, and that paying tax, it's not a wish list, because if you get the tax from all the tax avoiders, and that message is hammered home every time we come out with all these policies, because otherwise our critics and the cynics and the naysayers will just say it's a wish list. And it's not a wish list, it's affordable, but it has to be linked to a fair tax system as well as a fair transport system. And the money's there in abundance, it's just not collected.
I mean, tax is the price we pay for a civilised society, straightforward. And if you look at a lot of the countries, some of the Scandinavian countries, you look at how divided countries are, you tend to find in countries where they're spending more on social projects, more on social welfare, where they're looking after the populations, that you get more equal societies, more societies which are at ease with themselves.
Less crime.
And one of the things we do know about the UK is it's a divided society, divided on lots and lots of different lines. Now, Remain and Leave as well, just to add to the problems. So, 100% right. Tax is good if well applied to social good. So,
And one final question.
In your hierarchy of transport, I think you had walking at the top and cycling, and then buses and trams and poor old cars at the bottom. I wondered what you thought about people using electric cars. How would that elevate the car position?
No, because no, absolutely not. I mean, the thing about transport is there's 2 ways to improve it, and one is decarbonising it, and the other one is making it more shared. All shared modes use all the resources that you're talking about far more efficiently than individual modes of transport, and they're better for society, they're better for equality. Anything that puts spend £20,000 as your entry level into being able to use it isn't a fair means of transport. So although we have to make all the buses electric and all of that as well, I'd much rather see much more shared electric vehicles coming in before we have any sort of individual electric vehicles. And they do have an awful lot of embodied carbon goes into making them. We were having a really interesting discussion as part of the London plan process, where brilliantly we asked the Mayor of London to put in policies on reducing the embodied carbon of buildings in terms of projects, and actually measuring this. And there's just been a methodology put out by some architects, this is for buildings, of how to calculate the embodied carbon of a building project. And the Mayor's gone straight out and he's adopted it in as partly on our suggestion into the draft London plan. Now we're expecting a bit of kickback because it's quite novel, but it's a really, really good thing for them to do. And it will be really useful for us as well. I had a chat with the man who wrote the REBA, the architect who wrote the REBA guidance that was the how to work it out. And he made a really, really good point, which is basically, like, if we're going to get to zero carbon by 2030, we could blow our entire carbon bank, what we're allowed to spend before we get to 1.5 degrees, building things that are low carbon. If we take the low emission vehicles route, we actually need to be as economical as possible in the embodied carbon of the things that we build. There's no point in knocking down all these buildings around us to build super eco-friendly ones to get an extra little bit of carbon use out of them, because the amount of carbon we used in doing that would be huge. So I think that's a really interesting point. I've not really heard I didn't express it as well as he did, but I've not really heard it expressed like that before. So that's another good reason to try to make sure that the electric vehicles we change to are ones that we share, whether that's buses that we share when we travel, or cars that we share by shared ownership and car clubs and things.
Great. Thank you very much to the questioners, and a massive thank you to both Andrew and to Sean for coming up. It's really, really special to have one of our national co-leaders, and we hope to be seeing a lot more of you, Sean. So thank you very much.